Good afternoon and welcome to this Google Hangout being hosted at Zipcar UK's offices in Wimbledon. My name is Mark Walker. I'm the General Manager of Zipcar in the UK, and I'm joined by a great panel for the discussion today. We have Patrick Robinson, who's the Head of Public Policy in Europe, I believe, for Airbnb. We have Sam Stevens, who is the founder of Streetbank. Aurore Hochard, I hope I pronounced that correctly, co-founder of TaskHub. And McStravik, who is the founder and CEO of Echo. We'll hear a little bit more about them and their services, their businesses in a moment. But first, perhaps just a little bit of introduction as to why we're holding this hangout today. So on Sunday, in 2 days' time, it's Global Sharing Day 2014, and the theme this year is neighborhood sharing. And we thought it would be nice to contribute to that particular theme with a discussion around how sharing can make cities more livable. Sharing is, of course, a very ancient thing. It's been around a long, long time, but in the modern context, and particularly the urban context, it's been made extremely simple and convenient and very relevant thanks to today's technology. And cities are becoming ever more important places in society. More than half of the world's population now lives in them, and that's growing very rapidly. Just taking London, where we are today, in the next decade, it's forecast there'll be another 1 million people moving into London. By 2031, another 1.6 million people coming into London. So that makes living in a busy, frenetic place like the megacities that we're creating, complex at times, expensive, quite challenging. And whilst life in the city can be extremely exciting and very vibrant, for a lot of people it can actually be quite oppressive and lonely too. But we believe, those of us who work in the sharing economy, that we have a role to play to make cities more livable places. And today we'd like to discuss how we do that and what's so important about that. And as I introduce the panel now and ask them to introduce themselves, the first thing I'd like to celebrate is the fact that the sharing economy is in fact a really quite loose term, and there are many dimensions to it. And just sat here in Wimbledon today, we manifest that through the businesses and services that we represent. So I shall ask each panelist, as they introduce themselves, to also just give an overview of how sharing works in their dimension, because I think that will illustrate just how different sharing can be. So perhaps if I could start with you, Patrick.
Yeah, sure.
Would you like to fire away?
Well, I mean, as you've said, Mark, we all deal with very different aspects of sharing in the city, and I guess Airbnb's role is enabling the sharing of the bricks and mortar of those cities. We're an online marketplace that operates globally that allows people who have spare space in their home, or indeed an apartment or a house that they're not using when they're not there, to share that with visitors from all over the world. We currently have listings available in well over 190 countries worldwide. We're in around about 35,000 cities and towns now, and around 15 million people have now travelled using Airbnb over the last few years, and in fact this year we've been averaging something like 1 million guests every single month. So this has become it's moved out of a kind of niche experience that many people have had in the past, and is really becoming a mainstream activity. So really the point that, or my role there, is to help educate policymakers and regulators across Europe about what this activity is, what we're doing, what our hosts are doing, what benefits our guests get from coming and staying on Airbnb, and what benefits there are to cities in helping to embrace this kind of activity and bring their laws and regulations up to date to make it safe and legal and positive for cities and neighbourhoods.
Fabulous. So a couple of themes that I'd like to come back to in a moment, but let's just go around the panel first and each introduce ourselves.
Yeah, so hard to follow those metrics. So I'm not going to try to. Yeah, so I'm CEO of Echo. We're based in East London, Stratford. we're a marketplace without money. So our members, be they individuals, local people, all the way up to corporates, trade their resources an hour for an hour. So every hour of human resources support, or gardening help, or use of a studio, that's rewarded with 1 echo, which our members then use to buy in an hour's resource from someone else. We're relatively new. We did a proof of concept, and then we launched last September in Hackney. We're now across 4 London boroughs, and what we're particularly interested in is, well, we provide a commercial resource to organisations and business. We enable them to save money by unlocking their resources and trading them for echoes and then buying new resources in return. What we're most interested in, though, is the kind of secondary benefits that come when members, be they individual or organisation, trade using time rather than money. And we think that there are many things that money is amazing for, and we think there are some things that it's not great at. And building and seeding and developing relationships is kind of one of those things. And so we have a primary kind of social driver as part of Echo, and that kind of works in conjunction with our commercial as well.
So TaskHub.co.uk is an online marketplace as well, except people pay to list their skills and services on the platform. And basically, people come on our website when they're looking to find someone from a carpet cleaner to a makeup artist to a hairdresser locally. So people use TaskHub a little bit like Google, except it's hyper-local. So that's probably what Google is missing at the moment, is the hyper-local aspect of things. So when you're looking for, let's say an electrician or a photographer, we've got lots of photographers actually. Locally, they just type what they're looking for within which category, where they like this person to be based, and click on search. And so we've got over 500 professionals listed. So it's not quite comparable to Airbnb, but this service was launched in January this year only. And we realized that we're very much about connecting people with skilled people in their local community. And at the same time, we realize we're really helping the micro entrepreneurs find local businesses, and also people who may not have a business as such, but are really skilled or passionate about something, and allow them to promote themselves, their skills, their services locally. So that's our mission.
Fabulous. Dan?
So Streetbank's a website that lets you share things and skills with your neighbours. So things like electric drills, ladders, dog walking, and we allow people to do that without any exchange of money or even credits. So I'm just making parallels with Echo. All you get in return is a warm feeling inside. So that's what it is. It shows you everyone within a mile of you. It's taken off. You can join anywhere in the world, but it's particularly taken off in London, in Melbourne, in Olympia, Washington State, the thing that gets us excited is the way that sharing, neighbourhood sharing, which is what the Global Sharing Day is all about, can help build community.
Absolutely. And I enjoyed my first completed Streetbank share yesterday.
Hooray.
When somebody came to my house and took off my hands a gazebo that I could never put together myself. So that was fabulous. I should, just to complete the picture, Zipcar, of course, we allow people to share cars, which are expensive and a hassle in the city. And I guess our model is that we sit in the middle of all the sharing, we own the cars, we provide a booking system. I think what always interests me about, but why is that different from renting by the hour? It's the fact that there is also a contract between all the members. There's a code of conduct that's required to make that work, insofar as every member has to bring the car back on time, ready for the next member. They have to bring it back clean, ready for the next member. And that's why it's, for me, that sharing as opposed to just a pure transactional piece of business that's going on. So, first bit of probing for this conversation, I think, as I said in my introduction, cities are actually quite challenging places for lots of people because they're expensive places to live these days. And interestingly, around the different models we have, there are examples where you can save money, and I would put kind of Zipcar in that category. You can save money by sharing a car rather than owning a car. There are examples where you can supplement your income by renting out a spare room, for example. And then there are just forget money altogether. And I'm interested to know from each of us how we think that contributes now, but more importantly going forwards, to helping people live better lives in cities. And I think the hyper-local angle is interesting, and just where money's needed, where money's not, is fascinating for the future as well. Who would like to start with that? Anyone come forward?
Sure. It's interesting, isn't it? When we started Echo, it was very much about save money. We'll help you to unpack, latent capacity, trade that for Echoes, and then use those to buy in resources you'd otherwise be spending money on. We still do that. That's still part of our core sort of message. However, we've seen that organisations mainly are trading through Echo for Echoes, using those Echoes, but they're then going on to develop, to win commercial contracts as a direct result. And we've had to go and speak to our members and find out why that might be. And it seems like reputations and trust are being developed through the Echo network that are then sometimes staying within there, and people are interacting a lot more. We're definitely seeing that relationships are starting. But they're also being developed outside of Echo on a commercial kind of basis. That's really interesting. We certainly didn't expect that to happen, but we're really pleased about it. It certainly helps us to market. We've got a stronger offer to our organisation. But for us, this is just the beginning of unpacking why that might be. And certainly, we know that that kind of thing happens with people. Our background is working with individuals on this kind of accredited sort of basis. And we know that generally, over time, people express an increase in their sort of engagement in their communities and of their overall well-being. It's not about people ending up having Sunday lunch together, although they might do that, but more about people passing each other in the street and saying, how's your life? They're like, great, tiny, vital relationships that are, we would argue, sorely lacking. So it's those kind of secondary benefits that are starting to emerge for organisations who are obviously, run by people, and kind of identifying what they might be as well.
Out of interest, what sort of size of organisation is it that tends to be active at the moment?
Sure. So we've got about 450 organisations in those East London boroughs. They're trading about 300 hours for Echoes every month, and they range from sole traders, small startups, creative startups, lots of those, all the way up through SMEs, up to corporate. So UBS is a member, working, developing their corporate social responsibility activity. And Cabinet Office are a member as well. And they've been trading space with other members. They're working to budgets too. They want to do things without money too. Interestingly, as soon as we arranged that with Cabinet Office, DEFRA called a couple of days later and said, we understand there's some space being traded for Echoes. Can you tell us about it? Can we get involved too?
How do you price the space? How many Echoes for this space?
Well, it needs to be really quite strict. It's an hour for an hour. Yeah. So if you're using it for an hour, that's one Echo. We've had tangles where people have wanted to sell things for Echoes. That's quite tricky. There was a chap who wrote a book about currencies actually called RECT. I'll come back to you with the surname. Won't forgive me if I don't remember it. But he sold his book, but he came up with a very sensible way of how he was putting an hour value on his book. We did it that way. Produce and things.
Are there any people with perhaps professions, giving advice, who consider that their advice is worth 2 hours of someone else's? And how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? So there are, legal firms that are on board and they're offering legal advice, and accountants are offering accountancy. Generally, in our financial economy, very highly valued. But it very much, we haven't had any challenges really, but it very much depends on what our members are seeking to get in return.
Yeah.
Either they might be seeking, resources that might have a higher, at least in their perception, a higher commercial value than the ones they're contributing, or perhaps an equal one. But for the organisations who tend to be offering higher commercially valuable resources, there are other reasons for them being involved, and corporate social responsibility is one of them, or broadening their market, reaching new market, and winning commercial work off the back of that. And that's all well and good with us. That's brilliant. We keep to our very strict hour for an hour measure and ensure that other members do too. And so we get the same outcomes.
I think another interesting theme that we can come back to there is that interplay between this sort of new economy that you are creating and then just the regular cash economy, if you like, and the fact that by doing good business in the eco economy, you can then win conventional business as well because of the relationships and the trust and the awareness that you build. And interplay between conventional and sharing is a big theme at the moment. We're seeing that in London with, for example, the taxi fraternity and Uber, for example. This is causing a lot of friction, so it's an important thing. Now, there's no money, is there, in Streetbank?
No, except that you have access to. If you join in a busy area, you might have £4,000 or £5,000 worth of things that you suddenly have access to, and that's, I think, for us, the thing that draws people in. I think that once they get going with it, they're motivated by different things, by that sense of community building. Certainly, the hook for us is the chance to get access to all sorts of things. The other thing that we think drives activity on Streetbank is freeing up space. So people want to get rid of stuff, and so there's a sort of free cycle element to it, but with the added benefit that you're meeting someone who's on your street or a couple of streets away.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of nice thing. You know it's gone to a good home, and if you run into the street, you're more likely to do. They give you a hearty wave.
And inherently, then, so if you're freeing up space, that has value. Because space is expensive. And if you're getting access to stuff that you'd otherwise have to buy, you've effectively, you're net better off.
You're net better off. On the storage, I wish I had the stat, but there is some incredible statistic just saying that 80% of you basically put stuff in storage, it stays there for an average of 15 months or whatever, and then you bin it. So it's just that seems to be a crazy way to live.
Okay. Aurore, your take on this?
TaskHub, I guess I feel a little bit of both what you guys just said. Although the person who is the one who wants to promote their skills and their services locally is the person who's going to be paying a standard fee per month. But once that person is listed, so they have their photo, their links to their social media channels, their phone number, they can also be contacted through the website. But once those people are listed, people come to our platform and can find information for free. So they just basically use our site, finding those people. And I have to say that since we've made that little change, it's really helped the interaction. So that's like we curate people, so that the trust that the people listed on the website, are either really skilled or actually they have their own business. But I have to say that once you remove this a little bit from, instead of having a fee from the transaction, it really helps, people connect with each other. And also, I think what we do is really helping those micro businesses. And so it's an opportunity for them to really promote their services at way cheaper rates than they would on other platforms. And I have an example. Someone just emailed yesterday saying that for a tenner he can be listed for 30 days on TaskHub. That a tenner with Google AdWords will get him really far. So it's almost democratizing, making opening the platform for those people who may not have the time, the resources, or the money to let people know I'm here and I'd like to do business with you. And it's just it's a nice way to help also people, especially like I said, the creatives. I was really not really surprised, but those people, if they have a profile on Facebook, it's great. Unfortunately, Facebook doesn't really allow those people to let the world know that they're here locally, ready to help the community. So it's really helping. On one side, on the economic side of things, it's affordable, but also it's really linking people. And we've seen exchanges of messages, obviously, when people are really happy to say, oh, I didn't realize on the map that you're really close to where I live. Yeah. So that's...
And were you saying at the beginning there that, so people register thinking that they're advertising their service, but actually once they're in the TaskHub family, they actually start using the other service providers as well. So it's
very
almost
much
creating local economic activity.
Absolutely. So like a photographer, I remember yesterday, again, just showcasing the different photographers. I think he's specialized in wedding photography. But at the same time, you couldn't help but see that the lady who was getting married, she had some really nice makeup and hair. And you think, well, who did that? And obviously, all those people are linked with each other. So it's like a whole network of people. If you start looking into makeup on Facebook, you're going to have a lot of people, except, like I said, unless you're a friend of those people who you know and you like that page, it's like a mine of information that is just, I think, what we're doing with TaskHub is just making it out there for everyone to see and for people to say, I need a photographer or makeup artist. Where is this person? So it's quite amazing that you think you help those small companies just almost compete with the larger ones, and people actually are looking for this. They are looking for people close to them to help them with different things. I really see that trend. I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's our experience too, actually, that people and organisations are disposed to trade with others who are close to them geographically, and that's great. And I'm sure you're seeing that. You're seeing that too.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, the big difference for us, well, there are a number of differences from what you just outlined. I mean, one of the most obvious differences is that our exchanges tend to be international exchanges. They tend not to be within a local community. So you tend to be inviting somebody from France to come and stay in your house, or somebody from Japan to come and stay in your house. The economic benefits are multiple. So clearly, hosts who are renting out their space on Airbnb are making some money. And the average, we did some research earlier this year, the average in the UK is just under £3,000 a year. So it's a significant amount of money, but it's not, this is not professional activity in any definition that you would imagine. But this is clearly money that when we ask people what they're using it for, they're using it to meet their rising costs of living. They're using it to help make ends meet. They're using it to help pay for the house in which they live. Many of them, and we know that a high proportion of our host base, tend to be employed in non-traditional forms of work. They're much more likely to be contractors or freelancers or running the business on the side or entrepreneurs. 30% of them have set up their own business. So this is often economic activity that helps them with other economic activity. I think the other similarity with you guys is that we create these ecologies within the local community then, because we have clusters of hosts. Good hosts are recommending local businesses to go to. Because there is a very much broader spread of Airbnb listings across a city than just where the traditional hotels are, we're much more, our community is much more embedded in areas of the city that don't normally get tourists coming to stay. So we find that small businesses benefit because people are recommending that their guests go to the local restaurant or go to the shop round the corner rather than, trundling into the centre of town and going to all of the usual tourist traps. So
that was exactly my experience in Istanbul using an Airbnb. Yeah. So I went to the local Turkish baths and got absolutely pummeling, and then went to the sort of bravely went to the local nightclub, and it wasn't, I would never have gone there if I just followed the Lonely Planet's guide.
Those are the kinds of stories we hear from guests all over the place.
Sure.
And clearly there is also economic value to the guests here, who are usually getting to experience something that they wouldn't otherwise have experienced if they were staying, in a more traditional form of accommodation. But what I find interesting is that when we talk to hosts, generally they started sharing on Airbnb to earn some additional money, but the reason they keep sharing on Airbnb is because of the connections they make with their guests, because of the increased pride they have in their local area, because they enjoy the experience of welcoming guests to their town and to their neighbourhood. So the benefits begin to spread.
I think if I may just extend on what Patrick just said, it's interesting because I've got a friend who has a flat listed on Airbnb. And it's interesting because, like you say, initially it was the idea of making a bit of money of that spare room. But quickly we realized that on one side people want to make money or save money because life is expensive in cities. But on the other side, I feel like they start liking sharing, and they start having maybe other needs when they realize, this friend in particular, she just said, I couldn't afford traveling that much if it wasn't for my listing on Airbnb. So actually she uses the money she makes with, Airbnb and goes on holiday. And I realized, and on TaskHub, it's some people do this when they say, well, I already have a full-time job, but I really enjoy, taking photography, or I really, enjoy cooking, baking, gardening. That why don't I just do this on the side locally? It's easy, I get to know my neighbors, but at the same time, the money I make, I can just use it for other things that I like. So it's actually almost, being able to contribute towards your passion and your hobbies. So I find this interesting.
Before I move on to some away from money, one thorny question, and maybe Patrick, you're probably the best first to answer this, is what for those people who are receiving income from this, what is the legal status around them declaring that income and so on?
It varies from place to place. Taxation is a very complex area. For the most part, this stuff is income. It's income that needs to be reported in the way that any additional income that you earn from a part-time job or any form of income is, and there's usually a space on the tax form to complete that. And that really is the responsibility of the people who are earning this money, and we will help to signpost to people what they've earned. And in some places, there are other taxes that may be due, such as tourist taxes, which again we will help hosts to collect and encourage them to pay that on. So taxation is complex, it varies from place to place, but actually the thing that we find when we start engaging with regulators and policymakers in this area is that they see an opportunity that if they can put this kind of activity on a firmer footing, it can be a new form of a new tax base for them, and that's something that I think enriches cities and enriches countries more generally.
And I think that whilst it's always popular to knock tax, of course you can only be taxed on income that you're deriving. So you start in a positive position, you just become a little less positive actually. You're still net positive even after that. Okay, let's move away from money for a moment, and I think everybody's touched on kind of community, neighbourhood, people connections as well. And with our theme of making cities more livable, I think this is an enormous thing, actually, because in my personal view, as years have gone by, we've lost quite a lot of local natural community. Children don't play in the streets anymore, and we're more concerned with communicating with the person that's in our phone than we are with the person who lives next to us. These things have changed over time. So could you just talk a little bit more around how you see how your models are really helping to promote that, but what that means for making the city a better place to live in? Would you like to start, Matt?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess similarly to these guys, we found that people or businesses, organisations join Echo to get something because they need it and they understand they have some assets that they can trade for that. But quite soon they get, it's hard to describe it as anything other than the warm feeling, right? I don't know what the correct definition is, but they receive positive benefits from sharing. So
the mighty endorphin kick.
Yeah. Right. It feels good, and I suspect we've all done that. I think that what seems to happen is that they start trading with echoes. That hopefully they continue to do so. But it's the positive feeling that comes with it that keeps them doing so. I guess what you get when lots of people make positive connections is packets of relationships, negative trading. And when you get lots of packets, you get something you might call community. Certainly, we feel that, certainly in London, it's very transient communities, and people don't get to meet their neighbours very often. When they do, and I was lucky to live in a street in London where people did start to speak to each other a lot more than in other places. That was a massive benefit to us. It made me feel part of something much bigger than just between our kind of four walls. So that is kind of an essential part of what we're moving towards. And the commercial benefits, as I said before, they seem to come thereafter as well with relationships. That kind of happens. But it's kind of key for us to keep working that way.
Well, I mean, the warm and fuzzy thing, I think, is actually about that sense of surprise and delight that you get in realizing that actually other people are quite nice. What's amazing about the kinds of experiences that we all engender, whether paid for or swapped, is that they rely on somebody doing something for somebody else, and that experience being a good one. And I think, cities were the original sharing platforms. That's where people came together, trading places where people are bringing skills and experience and knowledge and all living together. And I think the kind of increased level of isolation and alienation that we all feel in modern life needs to be punctured sometimes. And the notion that you could open your house to a complete stranger and trust them to look after your place probably better than you would look after it yourself, and for you to end that experience having had a good experience, I think kind of restores your faith in other people. And if you can get those experiences going at scale, we all begin to feel a little bit more connected to one another as people. And actually that begins to generate really positive outcomes. So, from our experience, where we've had cities in crisis, be that through natural disasters like Hurricane Sandy in New York, or the Balkan floods at the moment, or even the floods in the southwest of England, people's capacity to open their homes for free to people and to use our platform to allow people to find accommodation who are in need, that's a really, really strong benefit and a real sign that people are actually a lot nicer than people give them credit for.
I agree. I think that people are naturally trusting. And thanks to platforms like ours and others, it's helping making it normal. I think the same way maybe, I don't know, many years ago when people started to buy things through eBay or Amazon, it used to be quite, I'm buying something from someone I don't even know. But then it's kind of become normal now to buy something online. And so now opening people's doors and do things together, the more people see it, the more they do it, and the more it seems like, I feel someday we won't talk about the sharing economy because it will be the economy. That's how people will live. They won't be sharing economy. That's just how we will live, sharing and just living together.
But the cultural force of the day is incredibly strongly directed towards individualism and owning your own thing and owning your own home. And all of these things are good and fine, but there are some negative. I believe there's some negative impacts that means that it's extremely expensive to own everything. And so this is going back to the first question about saving money. Actually, if you share things with other people and you tap into the sharing economy, you can live much, much more cheaply. But then coming on to the second question about community, individualism means you don't interact with anyone else, and you do believe that that other people are weird, or that the stranger is dodgy, or that your neighbours are noisy or nosy. So I think my own view is that the great thing about the sharing economy is exactly as you said, Patrick, that the other person, the stranger, the neighbour, is surprisingly good, and that's great news. It's turning on its head the culture of the day around individualism.
I absolutely agree. I wonder if I could add something to that, in that what we find is that the hour for an hour mechanism that we use seems to imbue every transaction with a bit of equality. It's actually incredibly rare in our society where your time is worth exactly the same as mine. And we know that members make their own calculations as to what they can offer up for echoes and what they need to, reserve for commercial revenue. But actually, when they trade at the point of transaction, that acknowledgement of equality is implicit, and that has an effect. And I think that means that both parties, whether they've been providing something or receiving it, they might shake hands at the end, and it's not the same as sort of £10 please, thanks very much, on your way. There's something more to it than that, and it seems to be the germ of the relationship. We seem to be touching on something quite similar, I think.
Well, I think we all agree violently on this. I think the challenge, though, for us is we probably, are still in fairly early stages of this thing branded the sharing economy. The difficulty for us is that the entire sort of lexicon of politics, economics, accounting, law even, is the old way. It is about ownership, and it's about numbers and things. And there isn't yet a nice, neat, easily communicated way of valuing and communicating this feel-good factor that is connection with your local communities. And I think that's a challenge for us, actually, because the more people we could get to understand that mainstream, the quicker things would move, actually.
But it's more than that. The sofa that's given away on Streetbank will not add anything to gross domestic product, but it is of economic value. I mean, GDP needs to be recognised as a very bad measure of economic activity.
Look, totally, and I mean, I know a bit about cars, so talking cars for a moment, part of our mission is to have people use cars only when they need to use cars and not at other times. The net effect of that is less driving. Okay? Now, less driving means you need less road space. That's interesting. It means you need to build less new roads. It means you have money available to reallocate to other uses. So that starts to get very strategic and very political. But at the moment, that's not grasped at all, I don't think. But get our concept mainstream, and the benefits that flow are extraordinary, because we are able to reallocate huge amounts of capital into much more productive means than a fourth lane, a fifth lane, or a sixth lane on a motorway.
I think one of the benefits that when we talk to some cities they get is this notion of scaling up, scaling down. So there was a press release out this week from the Scottish Government talking about the Commonwealth Games and options open to tourists around Commonwealth Games time. And we were delighted to see we were listed as possible source of accommodation for the Commonwealth Games. Well, it is hard for cities bidding for those kinds of big events or coping with huge influx of visitors for a big trade fair in Barcelona or the Edinburgh Festival or the Brighton Festival, to be able to have that level of accommodation available all year round just to deal with those spikes, when instead you can have a huge community suddenly activated to deliver what's needed at the right time and then deactivated when it's not required. This is just a much, much more efficient way of doing it, and that's why the internet is the thing that has enabled all of these models to develop, because not only is it a terrific foundation on which to build online reputation and to bring that sense of trust, but it is the thing that enables you to just much more efficiently match supply and demand in real time for all of the various things that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to give an example of that. I think
I
you know what I'm talking about.
It, yeah.
Getting people ready for certain situations, whether it's an event or an emergency, a crisis. And recently we talked about the floods. It was interesting to see that we were able to help create a platform where people were able to ask for help. So flood victims.
And these are floods in the UK.
Yes, in the UK.
Yeah.
And so I think, going back to your point, sometimes I think we underestimate the power and the value of of such platforms when actually people are able and happy to share, to say at some point, I need some help. Someone might be able to say, I live in this area, and I need someone to help me carry my furniture from A to B because I'm flooded. And then people locally will see, oh, well, I can help. I've got a lorry. I'm really happy to come and help you. And actually, here we're talking, it's not, even if it's volunteering, that's what a country needs at some point. We need to open up to unlock all those resources. And we were really happy to be able to do this and realize that people, again, extremely generous, and people, again, saying, I'll open my house for you, to people they didn't even know.
Absolutely.
So it was a really, really great experience.
It's fabulous, fabulous. Now, there's one other topic that I definitely want to cover before we have to close. Let's see how we go on this. So if we're all agreed that we're onto something special, and we think everybody would benefit from it being mainstream, but there's still a big chasm for us to jump there and a huge opportunity, then we're still in the world where money talks, that's true, and the people with the most money are corporates and public sector organizations, and they can accelerate mainstream activity through policy and how they go about doing stuff. Can you each give me a take on where you are now, where you want to be with respect to large businesses or government or local councils transacting through your services, making use of your services? Because just think of the signal that sends and of the quantum leap in activity that brings were they to really get involved. Who wants to start?
I've got an idea.
Okay.
I think it would be really nice if larger companies, when they need, so let's say in my case, in services, when they need someone to do, to do catering, or they need someone to take photos of an event, that instead of going to, and that's kind of a reflex, unfortunately, you go on Google and you find, and people who will have money, large companies will have money to advertise. So they probably have a better chance to be contacted. But what if people started to think, okay, why don't we go on platforms like we have and start looking the talents we have locally, and then start spreading the word? And in this case, I don't even think it would be bad for big companies, because it's actually increasing the competition. And in a way, I think that there's space and enough people for everyone. So, but if people could have this reflect a little more, to just look around and just, give a chance to someone who is good to do, to sell services. And then when you're happy, well, you just share it. Well, even if you're not happy, you will share anyway. So just, make it a habit and spread around you. When you're happy about this kind of services, just give a chance to people close to you.
Yeah.
Well, to some degree, that is happening with Echo, Cabinet Office, UBS are sort of engaged and taking part. And we are partnered with London Legacy Development Corporation, taking care of the Olympic site, legacy of the Olympics. They've kind of jumped on board as well. They have woven Echo membership into their procurement process. So if you want to tender on enter a bid on a tender with London Legacy, the Olympic Stadium, you need to join Echo. You need to commit some of your resources to that. That's really useful, because then those organisations in turn need to earn their Echoes. So they need to speak to their supply chain and see how that's going to work. If that's happening, it's brilliant. So it's that kind of leverage that brings a necessity to certain organisations to join, but also we were probably all at number 10 in January, and when legitimacy was on the very top of the list, probably just under tax, of issues or challenges that organisations were facing, and it's that kind of commitment that brings legitimacy to methods that we're developing, and that can really mainstream what we're doing, and the fact that Airbnb is listed as a supplier, accommodation supplier, is part of that, isn't it? So that all types of organisation and people see these methods as valuable ways to go about their daily business.
Yeah.
I mean, if President Obama or Prime Minister Cameron or King Juan Carlos would like to list some of their unused space on Airbnb, I'm sure we would accept some of those spaces on there. I think.
What about the other way around? Do you have insight yet into how many people use you for business trips? For example?
We hear an increasing number do. I mean, I do, for example.
Yeah.
We know that an increasing number of people are doing that, and an increasing number of companies are thinking about it as an alternative source of accommodation. That's not where we're directing our effort. We're very much still a consumer-to-consumer, peer-to-peer platform. Who knows in future where we could end up. I think the point about the ask to government and to the public sector more generally, it is really about waking up to the notion of these business models. And we have had quite a lot of success across Europe now, working with different cities to try and update those laws and update those frameworks that used to apply to the kind of old forms of economic activity, to try and find new ways of regulating the sharing economy that both enable the kind of activity that we're all engaged with and create consumer confidence and legitimacy, but that also are appropriate to this new form of almost self-regulatory activity that we have and self-regulatory foundations that we have through the review systems that we have and the trust and verification systems that we have and the kinds of insurance guarantees that we offer people, so they can look at business models like ours and understand what level of basic protection there already is, and therefore where regulation and policy needs to be additive rather than substitutional.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have large businesses or government offices sharing stuff through Streetbank?
We don't have large government departments, sadly. A nice example is that we've been working with Camden Council, growing the number of Streetbank members within the borough to 2,500. So that would be it would be sort of 7 or 8% of all households within Camden would be members of Streetbank. But at the same time, we've been working with Veolia, the waste management business in Camden. So they are distributing flyers, and I think that there's quite a nice fit between a big business. If this works, which is due to happen next week, it would be nice to sort of partner more deeply with Veolia across all of the places that they operate, and for us to be included in their contracts, their pitch. Yeah, I think that it's certainly scale is key. Where we are dense, Streetbank works really well, and a big business, a BT or a post office or a government department has the capability to help us do that.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
I'm going to go one step further than you guys have and say that in our experience with cars and corporate car sharing, there are lots of examples where the embedded way of accessing a car, such as a company car, for example, is very much promoting ownership, even for people who don't need it. And that's deeply embedded in remuneration structures and culture and status, all kinds of things. It's deep. Tax, yeah. And moving forward to a place where you might share the car rather than everyone have their own requires leadership and a little bit of bravery at the moment as well. So we'll see. Now, we've got time, I think, for at least one question that's come in advance. And the one I'd like to home in on is this trust and reputation. Because when you are either sharing something that you do actually own with a stranger, maybe a stranger from overseas, in the case of Airbnb, or indeed you might be exchanging skills with somebody you've never actually done business with before, might be receiving advice from them. The more upfront assurance that we can provide, the better, and that will act as oil in the cogs of this machine that we operate. To what degree are you providing some sort of trust assurance score for people now? Question one. Question two, should you continue to do that unilaterally? Or should there be some kind of single shared scoring mechanism that works across sharing services? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I mean, we do. So the very foundation of it is that host and guest review one another after their stay, and you build up a reputation, a series of reviews. It's very like eBay and many other online marketplaces in that sense. The other thing that we do is ensure that if you're on the platform, you have the opportunity to build trust from the get-go by linking your profile on Airbnb to Facebook and to LinkedIn and to other social media networks. And crucially, we encourage host and guest, potential host and potential guest, to communicate with each other before the transaction in order to assess a fit. And that works really well. The question of whether that is reputation that you should be able to port with you to other services, I don't know about that. I mean, if I think about what you're really assessing, yes, you're assessing the sort of fundamental essence of somebody's character in that, but you're also doing so in relation to a specific transaction. What's it like to have you staying in my house? What's it like to stay in my house? I think that's rather different from saying what's it like to be in my car, or what's it like to have my, I might be great, a great guest to come and stay with you. I might be a lousy electrician. So actually, I think we do need to have some degree of specificity when it comes to peer assessment, depending on the context.
I agree. I think the thing I like, as you said, is on Airbnb, you rate after the stay. What I think is important is to be sure that you have a rating with a certain transaction, so that we obviously try not to have just your grandmother, your aunt, and your neighbor they just really like you and they want to give you nice, ratings. So that's one thing. The way we do it on TaskHub is first, and that's something that people like, is we're humans. So we curate. We don't just list anyone like you can on other websites. We just actually take the time to email people, to call them, to meet them. Sometimes we'll attend events and we'll actually maybe get to meet people. Like last week I went to a designer's event and I was able to actually meet people and see what they do. And also obviously the fact that people want to list, will want to share all their details, whether it's their phone number, their website, their Twitter, Facebook account. And so that's obviously something that really helps with trust. And obviously they want to, again, link their profile and say that they've been Twitter verified or Facebook verified. That really helps. But yeah, basically that's how we do it. On a very human way, very personal way.
Yeah.
I'm going to slightly disagree. There you are, finally a bit of disagreement. But I think that if I knew that someone had stayed, it made a good guest, I'd be very happy to lend my ladder to them. And so actually, we've thought about sort of sucking Airbnb data into Streetbank. I don't know whether it's been done elsewhere, but it's
not that I know of. But
I mean, it's a thought, and I don't know whether you'd stop it happening, but because so many people have Airbnb profiles now. I personally think that the whole trust thing is overplayed. That if it's not an issue that's on the site, then people don't think about it, and people do trust. It doesn't. I think it doesn't stop people. You don't need loads and loads of trust matrix on there in order for people to use the site. Is my view.
But does it depend whether you open your door to your house and you
in
can have that?
In the Streetbank
Right,
context,
yeah, because I guess it's very different if you let someone in your home to do something on your own person, let's say, versus a car, sharing a flat. I think all these probably. It's interesting. A few days ago, I realized that where I live, we have a Facebook page, and then a few days ago, a neighbor asked just an open question. I need someone to install my dishwasher. Can someone advise? Someone else did. And And I realized it's funny because these people don't know each other, I know, but just because they live in the same place, right away they seem to trust, and I shared a number as well, and I had never met this person, I didn't even know who he was, and right away he said, yeah, please give me the number, and I was thinking, it's interesting, what is trust at the end? It's really, it made me think, really.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm kind of more on with Sam on this, and I think that there is a kind of 360-degree kind of trust value that and it can be weighted so that you get an overall kind of profile that is really valuable. We kind of verify our members and make sure that they can offer the services that they say they can. Indeed, every time they post a listing, they need to confirm that they have the necessary insurance or qualifications to do so. But ultimately, it is the feedback that kind of provides the most valuable sort of mechanism there. And some we found out this week that some members are using feedback as testimonials on other websites to kind of like confirm their
almost like a reference.
Absolutely, yeah. So that for us is the most valuable kind of mechanism.
Okay, well I think we're going to have to draw this discussion to a close. We could go on a lot longer actually, but we'll pause here. We've managed a bit of disagreement at the end as to how to handle the whole trust reputation thing. But I did note down some common themes that I think came through, and I'd like to relate these back to neighbourhood sharing, Global Sharing Day. And I think that around all of our models, we do, and in the context of cities, for a lot of people being quite challenging places to live, actually, then I think we have examples where we allow people to simply generate extra income. We have examples where we can help people save money so they can use the money they have for the best purposes. Actually, on trust, when we were discussing this earlier in the conversation, generally speaking, it's out there. People do trust each other, and most people are honourable. So there is a natural willingness to get involved, and people do generate this extraordinary feel-good factor the more they engage with the people around them. And whilst that isn't recognised in accounting systems, it has enormous value for society, actually. And then right at the beginning, and I think linked to that, very important, is the way in which we help local communities and local economies buzz, because that's where a lot of the energy and a lot of the growth really comes from. It's not the big corporates, actually. So I think there's a number of examples there where people getting together in neighbourhoods, using services like the ones that we provide, will help make cities more livable places. So I'd like to say thank you to all of you for participating today here in Wimbledon, and thank you to the team for putting it together in double quick time. And on that, we will close. Thank you.